friends, it's Christy. I'm so glad to be back with you on the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the new Your Extraordinary stamp set. And I'll also be pulling a couple of leaves and a flower from the Birdie Brown Sunshine and Friendship set. You could use any little foliage background images from any of the sets that you might have. And I have stamped those images in Extreme Black Hybrid ink on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm starting with my largest dinosaur, and I chose BV20, BV23, and BV25. These look gray from their caps, but they're actually really desaturated purple tones, which I think will come across as I continue coloring with them. But I'm starting with that BV25 and laying in some shadows down the back of the dinosaur, right there where the scales are, just below the scales. And then I also added a little shadow on the underside of the belly where it's real low to the ground. I blended that out with the BV23, and then I'm coming in with my lightest shade, the BV20, and I'm coloring over the edge of that BV23 to kind of pull that color into the lighter space, and then filling in any of the white space that remains. I'm going to color right over those spots that are on the hindquarters because I'm going to color those in darker, so I can just go right over top. That's going to save me from having to go around them. So when I get done with this, I am going to do a second layer off screen. And then I also wanted to add a touch of color to the little flower. I used the BV23 for the outer edge and the BV20 to add a little color to the center. And then I'm coming in with the BV29, which is one shade darker, plus the BV25, which was the darkest I used on the body. And I'm going to do a little shadow. I actually had the wrong marker in my hand to start, so I did the BV25 first. So now I'm coming in with that BV29 and just doing a little shadow on the opposite side. So it actually worked out because the shadow will match how I did it on the dinosaur's body. And then I'm going to do the spots with these two shades as well. Just starting with that BV29 and then filling in with the BV25. And then I did go back and just blend those out a touch with the lighter shade as well on those scales. Then I'm moving over to the dinosaur on the far right. I'm going to use some more purples, just a little bit of a different shade, but they're also very dusty purples, so I think they go really well. I chose V22, V25, and V28. And for this dinosaur, I'm going to do pretty much the same shading at the top of the head and then down the side of the neck and along the back where the spines are, using that V28. And then I'm blending that out with the V25. I'm going to pull that down even further with the V22, but I decided I wanted to get even softer at the bottom of the face and the belly, so I did pull in the V20 for that, and just filled in the rest of that white space. And then for the scales on this one, I'm going to do the V28 and the V25, just using that V28 at the top like I did on the other dinosaur, and then blending toward the bottom with that V25. The final dinosaur, the little Stegosaurus, I'm also going to do in some dusty purples, but these are a little bit more of a pink toned purple. I chose V91, V93, and V95. So all of them will be very similar in that dusty purple tone, but they each have their own little look to them as well. So I use that V95 for the shadows, and I'm blending out with the V93. Once again, I'm going right over those spots just to save time, and then I'll color them in a little bit darker. And then I'm using the V91 as the highlight, and then making sure to color in their little legs as well. So then I'm coming in with the V99 and the V95 for the scales on the back, and using the V99 closest to the head and then blending toward the back with the V95. And then again, just doing those spots with those same shades. Just blending that out nicely. And then I'm also going to do the little bow tie on the tall dinosaur's throat with those shades as well. For the little greenery, I went with G20, G24, and G28. I'm starting with the G24. I wanted the colors to be distinct and kind of like multi-toned. I didn't want it to be super blended out. So that's why I started with that mid-tone, and then I'm blending out with the G20. And then once I have all of those leaves colored in, I'm going to go back with that G28 and just do a tiny little bit really close to the stem at the base of each leaf. So you get that little bit of a darker color right there. And then I'm going to do the leaves on the flower as well. And I put the darkest closest to the flower where that would be casting a shadow. And then I'm blending out toward the tips of each leaves with the lighter shades. I colored the little boots with E43 so they would look like little hiking boots, just one shade since they're so tiny. And then I added a touch of color to the bottom of the clouds with the BG10. And then I grabbed a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just went over the eyes of the dinosaurs, and then I trimmed these images out with their matching dies. For the background, I took the inside and out stitch circle stacks and die cut that out of some Bristol smooth surface cardstock. I'm going to blend on some Distress Oxide ink. The first shade that I'm using is Salvage Patina. I'm going to use this to create my sky. So I'm just sponging on a little bit of color in the middle. It doesn't have to be super smooth and even because I want it to almost look like a cloudy sky. So there's little spots of lighter and darker areas there. Then I'm going to come in with some Twisted Citron to kind of bridge the transition from the sky to the ground. I want it to look almost like a jungly scene here. And then I'll add some mowed lawn down at the very bottom. Just carefully blending that on using the edge of my ink blending tool and taking that up on the sides where I want that color to look like some brush in the distance. And then I'm going to go back and forth and kind of work my way to making this blend just a touch more seamless, going back to that Salvage Patina first and then going over the transition area with the Twisted Citron. And then I wanted to create a little more interest in this background, so I'm going to take an acrylic block and add a little bit of water on that, pick that up with a small paintbrush and flick that all over the surface of that panel. Let it set in the cardstock for just a few seconds and then blot that up with a paper towel. And then I'm going to do the same with some mowed lawn Distress Oxide. I'm just going to mix that up with a touch of water and then do some splatter with that. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry. And then I'll move on to my background. I've got another piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock. And I'm going to start with the Twisted Citron in the center this time, just kind of creating a little oval shape in the very center. And then I'm going to go back to my mowed lawn, which is my darker green shade, and I'm going to come in from all the edges and really darken up those so that it pulls focus towards the center because that's going to be the lightest area. So I'm not worrying about the blend at this point. I just want to make sure that that color is on there, and then I'll go back and make everything more smooth in a minute. And I grabbed a scrap piece of paper just to keep my fingers out of the ink, not only to keep them clean, but also to prevent me leaving fingerprints in that ink and kind of messing up that blend. So I went back over with the Twisted Citron on the kind of transition area, and now I want to darken up those edges even further. So now I'm bringing in some Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to bring that in on all four sides as well. And that's really going to help just pull your focus to the center of the card where our focal panel is eventually going to go. So I'm just adding that dark color on there again, and then I'll go back with my mowed lawn to kind of smooth that out. and just make sure that there's no harsh lines or any marks that are left behind from the blending tool. And then I'll go back one final time to the Twisted Citron after that and blend out that center one more time. And then I wanted to create some more interest on this background as well. So I'm going to do some splatter detail with the water plus all 3 shades of Distress Oxide ink. So once again, just adding that to an acrylic block, I find that that just gives me more control that way. And then I'm doing the same with the mowed lawn, just adding that, and gives me like a finer spray of dots as well, which I prefer. Then I'll do some Twisted Citron to add some flecks of that lighter color and a little bit of the Rustic Wilderness as well. And I didn't add any water to that one, so it wasn't really flowing, so I had to add just an extra squirt there, and then I was able to get a nice bit of that splatter on there as well. And then I'm going to just set this panel aside to dry. Then I took the Leafy Layer Cover Up Dynamics and cut that out of some Limelight cardstock, and I'm going to adhere that down over top of that splattered background. So I'm just taking some glue and running that along all 4 of the outside edges, and then I'm also going to pick a few places on the inner portions of the card, the parts that are just a little bit thicker, where I can add a few extra dabs of glue so that this will be adhered down nicely to the card front. So I'm going to take that and line that up on that panel and make sure that I've got an even border on all 4 sides, and then I'm going to carefully smooth that down into place. I love how that just adds another layer of texture and interest to that panel. I'm going to pop that focal panel into my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamping the sentiment that says "Big Thanks," and I did stamp that down twice to make sure I had a good impression. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I made that out of another piece of that Limelight cardstock. I just scored and folded it to a standard A2 size card, and then I'm stamping another one of the dinosaurs and the sentiment that says "You're Extraordinary." So now I'm ready to start assembling. I'm going to begin by adhering that background piece to the front of my card base, adding some more liquid glue to that, and then lining up all 4 corners until that is nice and straight on there. Then I'll grab my focal panel, and I've added some foam tape to the back of that to lift it up and give it a bit of dimension. So I'm just going to line that up in the center of the card and make sure that sentiment is nice and straight before I press that down. Then I can bring in my images, and I'm going to start with the tallest dinosaur. I want that one to really accent that sentiment, so I'm going to make sure that it's kind of tucked into his neck right near that bow tie. And then the other darker purple dinosaur is going to go opposite that one, and I'll add some of those leaves tucked behind them before that glue dries into place, just to kind of add a bit of scenery into there and give it that jungle vibe that I was going for. And I'll make sure that they're pressed down securely, and then I'll take the lighter pink dinosaur. I'm going to add that one down in front. The flower I'm going to add over on the right hand side, hanging off the edge of that focal panel just a little bit, and then I'll add the 3 clouds to the sky, 1 above the sentiment and 2 behind the taller dinosaur. At first I thought I wanted to overlap them, but I decided I didn't like the way that was looking, so I just kind of staggered them over in the sky back there. And that is going to complete this card, so I'm going to lift that up so you can see all of the detail and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed the March edition of Christy Gets Crafty with my favorite things. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys. Subscribe to my favorite things for more inspiring videos just like these here on screen. Bye-bye.